Okay. Rachel Fortune, hello.
Hi, thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm good. Welcome to the Square Pizza Podcast Zoom edition. Appreciate you joining. How are things going in Jacksonville today?
Things are going as good as they can be.
Yep.
We have a lot of important things going on.
Yeah, appreciate that. I think we'll certainly get to that. I think for the people zooming in, you'll talk more about who you are, but physically located in Jacksonville, and I think we as Insurmco do this work, fortunate to be in Charlotte and North Carolina, but get to know people like yourself in other markets. And so excited to kind of dig in, learn more about you, but Jacksonville, Florida today as well.
Yes. No, thank you for spotlighting our little city. I'd like to call us a big little town, but I'm from here. Love it. It's a beautiful, beautiful place.
Yeah. Well, big and like sprawled out, I learned too, right? Like almost second biggest land wise compared to Houston. Is that right?
That's right. Very spread out. We have bridges at all different points of the city. We call it big for that reason. It's
Right.
also small in terms of just the community feel. If you've been here for any period of time, you probably know a lot of people, and we all kind of build those relationships. It's a very relational town.
Can I ask the best part about Jacksonville? You can't say the people since you already said that.
Okay, that would have been my answer. Well,
You
then
can say it. You can say it if you want. You can say it.
that, and I will say, well, maybe the second thing is just being in the Sunshine State. I personally really enjoy being in a place where there's water as well. So to not be landlocked and to be able to go and see the ocean whenever I need, that just moment with nature is a gift.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So as you know, we like to start kind of the show and the podcast with some fun, get to know you situations a little bit. Important for us to let the listening audience know that you are also famous, and I've recently named to 40 Under 40, the business journal, I believe, in Jacksonville. So sending you some love.
Thank
Congrats.
you.
How was that experience? Or is
Thank
that experience, I should say?
Thank you. I would certainly not call myself famous, but I do appreciate that, and I do consider it a real honor to be recognized for leading important work that I am so proud of in my hometown.
Yep.
I do care deeply about this city, its young people, and our collective future. So to be recognized in a place and among a people so dear to me is very humbling.
Well, good for you. Congrats on that. That's awesome. And so I think part two is we may have a mutual friend in Crystal Roundtree, who
Yeah.
is currently the executive director of Teach for America, who in Charlotte, has previously recorded a Square Pizza Pod with us, but has not yet been released.
Mm,
So this gives you the opportunity, one, to share any dirt about Crystal that we should know about if yours hits the market first.
okay.
Um, or just anything fun, but tell us how you and Crystal know each other.
Yeah. Well, I've known Crystal for more than a decade now.
Okay.
We actually met when I joined Teach for America back in 2008. She was Teach for America Jacksonville's first executive director.
Mhm.
So we proudly claim Crystal. I was actually a member of our charter corps.
Oh,
And,
wow.
she was like a mini giant, just helping to launch the education reform movement here. JPEF was actually founded the year after. So,
The year after TFA came to town.
that's right,
Interesting.
2009. So there was a lot of just momentum and energy to get some really phenomenal education organizations in our city. And I would just say that, it was a privilege to serve with Crystal and, under her leadership in Jacksonville.
That's cool. She's great and doing incredible work in Charlotte. So to clarify this for people who aren't as familiar with the TFA model, so she was the executive director. You were a teacher the first year as a core member.
That's right.
So it may or may not be fair to say Crystal was a removed boss / leader, if you will. Is that fair?
I think that's absolutely fair. And what I will say is that just that experience with Teach for America and with Crystal and the whole TFA family, it just had a huge impact on me. I am from Jacksonville, knew I wanted to have a career in public service, but didn't know what issue area I wanted to focus on. And so, having that opportunity, I actually taught at the school around the corner from where my grandmother grew up.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's a very transformative experience for me. And, getting to meet great people like Crystal, who prior to her move to Jacksonville, it just made such a big difference for her own students up in Atlanta.
Yep.
It was very inspiring.
That's cool. And I think, yeah, let's maybe start there, Rachel, as we dive in. And so, um, we'll get to kind of the incredible work you're currently doing, but knowing that you grew up and presumably went to high school in Jacksonville and then came back to teach, like, and you taught what again? High school, middle school? Where were you teaching?
I taught elementary school.
Elementary school.
Yeah.
So talk, maybe if you remember what it was like being in elementary school. I don't from my childhood, but like, what was it like kind of growing up in Jacksonville and then, matriculating through the public school system to then coming back and being a teacher in maybe a non-traditional way with an organization like TFA?
Sure. And full disclosure, I actually never left. So I
Oh,
actually,
wow.
the first time I moved away from Jacksonville was on the other side of my first stint with JPEF, because this is my second time with the organization, but did also attend undergrad here at the University of North Florida.
So it really is the water. You can't get away. Just don't let it. You can't get away from it.
Let me I guess I'll back up to just tell you a little bit about me.
Okay.
So I am the proud parent of two beautiful kids.
Okay.
The first of which is actually 18 now.
Wow.
He just graduated from high school and is getting
Congrats.
ready to begin college at the University of Florida. I have a beautiful 15-month-old daughter as
That's
well.
good.
But sort of true to my story and my journey, I think that when I think about the things that most inspire me and just put me on this path to wanting to make a difference in this community, it has everything to do with my own upbringing in the inner city here.
Yeah.
I come from a low income background myself. So, having that opportunity to teach my students, for me in many respects felt like teaching my family, felt like teaching myself. What I will say is that one thing that is really unique about me is that I was a young parent as well. So my 18-year-old son, I had him when I was 16. And so to help people really understand kind of the arc of my journey and my story,
Yeah.
I think it's really important for people to know that those really intentional choices to kind of stay close to home were very much inspired by him too. And I think when I learned of Teach for America coming to Jacksonville, the recruitment team at Teach for America is amazing. So
They knew
if
where to
you
go.
had,
They were intentional about their recruiting,
like,
weren't they?
well, it's like
Yeah.
whether you knew about the organization or not. And for me, if it wasn't in Jacksonville, it probably wasn't on my radar as something that I was considering.
Yep.
They were just getting ready to launch the core here. And I just happened to be in my senior year in college and proud to serve as student body president at my school at the time. And so, they did a great job of recruiting me in. I was actually the second African-American female to do so. They haven't had one since. And so it was, very.
Student body president at North Florida.
That's right.
That's right. Good for you.
Yeah, no, thank you. You take these moments to kind of just reflect on the journey. And, those things are definitely things I'm proud of. But, because of my son, I wanted him to grow up, having a relationship with his family. And so, having that opportunity to go to college here on a full scholarship and then to teach here and then to continue serving here at the Jacksonville Public Education Fund when I transitioned to JPEF the first time, all really remarkable opportunities that I'm so grateful for.
That's really cool. And kind of going back to what you said earlier, interesting as we think about some of our work and you two from a systems level, sometimes on one day and then on the ground level the next day. But hearing TFA came to Jacksonville a year before JPEF came, imagining maybe some of the stakeholders overlap or one or the other. Interesting, because I would think organizationally in any city, maybe like the baseline type of organization or foundation would come and they would birth an organization like TFA or recruit, but it kind of happened in a different order.
That's right. And it probably won't come as a surprise for people who think highly of the people who choose to serve through Teach for America. But my predecessor as president at JPEF is a TFA alum. And so,
There you go.
it's a very, a wonderful organization. It has people who are both inspired to serve in the classroom and beyond the classroom. And so, definitely grateful. I actually met my predecessor in my classroom.
Wow.
When he was moving here to begin the organization. And you're absolutely right. Lots of common stakeholders, similar funding support, or stakeholders who really wanted to move education forward were invested in organizations like ours.
That's great. Good. And so now we're going to go back and forth a little bit here, but fast forward until today or yesterday with all your career in education, where you currently sit now leading JPEF, how has the current COVID situation affected your work at all?
Great question. So, we at JPEF, we really believe that our mission to help improve educational opportunities and to make sure that students, regardless of their background, have the best opportunities possible. It's more important now than ever. We've, of course, chipped in, as I think any and everyone who can has. It's an emergency relief efforts to help support local educators and students to just make sure they have laptops and other supplies to keep them teaching and learning from home. But longer term, our work really remains to use data to inform our investments in school leaders, teachers, and parent leaders so that the stakeholders who are closest to students and who have the greatest opportunity to drive those improvements have the support and the insights they need to really move students forward. So as far as how COVID has impacted everything, we have actually moved a lot of our supports virtually.
Sure.
So this summer, we're going to be supporting 30 Title I principals to develop robust plans for their schools as they prepare to transition back for the 2020-21 school year.
So
while they're
re-entry plans almost of helping them?
Well, their school plans. And our hope is to, support them in thinking through everything that they have learned about their students, about themselves amidst this pandemic. Unfortunately, it's not over yet.
Yep.
And so, I know that unfortunately, because we all have been engaging primarily from a virtual space, they really haven't had a lot of time together. And so, while they're with us, we'll definitely give them the opportunity in typical JPEF fashion to hear from national experts and thought leaders to really inform their thinking and their planning, but also to just give them that sacred space to think about like how things need to look different as they try to serve their students who unfortunately in many cases will come back a little further behind than usual.
That all sounds incredible. One immediate thought I have is, and it may be a micro question for us who kind of nerd out in education, but creating that almost professional learning community for those 30 Title I schools. How is that differentiated or maybe delegated differently than what they're required to do within the school district, which I think would be a normal or maybe a traditional role, I should say, in other communities? How do you guys kind of work with the district on that?
It's a great question. And we actually have a very strong partnership with the school district around this initiative. We call it the School Leadership Initiative, and actually arrived at the need to provide additional support to principals through that partnership. I very much appreciate this about our district partners is, just the ability for them to identify, here's an area where we actually do have a need and where we would like to see our community partners sort of step up and help us identify some innovative ways to do some things differently in the community. And so, what JPEF does, we like to, invite in additional expertise. I would not say this at all replaces the professional learning that the district already provides to principals. But what we have an opportunity to do is to really enrich the development that the principals are receiving by connecting them to resources that are not in our community. So we're inviting thought leaders from the Urban Schools Human Capital Academy, from Boston Public Schools. So really just trying to take a look at what's happening in other places. This is similar to the approach that we have had with the work that JPEF has done over the last 10 years in supporting teachers and, other education stakeholders as well.
That's really cool. Probably a model other markets should be considering, if not, right? I imagine you see a lot of cool benefits from that type of partnership.
Absolutely. And I will say, this is just partnership best practice.
Right.
Of course, we were very intentional about putting in place a really clear memorandum of understanding for the partnership so that could really guide all of our work and just make sure that we kind of have a clear plan for here's what we're trying to do through this. Here's what the district is here's the access that they'll provide and the support that they'll provide to make sure that we can support in this way.
That's great. And I think just for the listening audience, transitioning a little bit, but still related. So we're recording this on June 3rd, 2020, if I'm getting my dates right. But at least top of mind for me individually as a human and a white dude in the space, but also in education is just around George Floyd and the murder in Minneapolis, but then also the protests happening now and things across the country. if you feel comfortable, would be interested in your perspective on what that means to you as a human, but also as a leader in the space in Jacksonville and across the country.
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. And I guess I'll start by just saying that I am as disturbed, as heartbroken as many people are
Yeah.
about the fact that these incidences are still taking place. And as I watched the unfortunate incident with George Floyd, it just broke my heart. I would respond to that question just as a whole person, because I think we bring to the work who we are. And for me, I am a Black female who, as I mentioned earlier, grew up in a more impoverished area. I happen to be in my 30s. I happen to have been a teen parent. And so, I know all about the interconnected nature of social categorizations and how they can create overlapping and interdependent systems of discrimination and disadvantage. And so, I am deeply disturbed by the challenges that we still have as a country to really move past the foundation that was laid when it comes to systemic racism. I feel humbled and privileged to do the work that I do because when I say, that it's our mission at JPEF to help close the opportunity gap, it is very much understanding how those injustices are playing out in the educational system that I get to focus my work. And so, as a person, I am committed to doing any and everything that I can to be a voice, to be a resource, to be an advocate for the changes that are necessary to move us forward. And it's going to take all of us. I mean, I mentioned how interconnected these systems are. There is no silver bullet, but I do think that if we as a community really lean into what we're learning from these tragedies, we can ensure that we have a better and far brighter tomorrow.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing. I think, just incredibly disheartening, right? For a number of reasons that you so eloquently named. I think one in our day-to-day work, like always thinking about how the future of education can be built, but from our perspective, and I think likely from yours, can't be built without a focus on kind of how we got here as a country and as a system, but then also just the current systems that exist. So I think that has to be front and center, but and now still even more, right? I think for us and hopefully everybody. I think too, around like individually being vulnerable as a leader, but as a white dude in this space who wants to do good work, but also needs to understand the different systems and dynamics at place. Really important for my own personal development and also just for my team as a small business owner, and pride ourselves on being diverse and what our team looks like and believes as well. And then also just like how our schools can currently help move forward with rectifying this around anti-racist curriculum, cultural competencies in schools for kids and adults, like what else can be birthed from this to hopefully make sure nothing like this ever happens again.
Yes, spot on.
Yeah. We'd love to kind of, with that, but you spoke to a little bit and since we're such a big fan of yours, kind of the really important work you guys do with families as well. And we're a little biased with some work we've been fortunate to do here, focus on family empowerment. I love the family model and the work you guys do in Jacksonville. So can you tell the audience about that?
Sure, absolutely. Well, at JPEF, we have a long and unique history of mobilizing community members on behalf of public schools.
Yep.
I'll just say from the very beginning, I mentioned that this is my second stint with JPEF. I had the privilege of leading our One by One campaign, where we enlisted volunteers to hold almost 200 community conversations with 1,000 or so, 1,200 people to define the community's priorities for public schools. And so, really building on that foundation, today we have the opportunity to engage education stakeholders at the school, classroom, and family levels. We work really closely with the principals, with teachers and parents to help them develop their leadership skills and to connect them with system leaders to advocate on behalf of public schools. And so for the parent and the family work in particular, we have an initiative that is called Parents Who Lead that allows us to invest in the civic leadership skills of our local parents. So we're, not through that work necessarily endeavoring to help parents become better parents for their child, but really trying to activate their potential to be advocates for all children. And so we know that, parents have a very unique and powerful perspective and expertise themselves on what is happening with our students and in our schools. So through that work, parents not only participate in a really robust curriculum and developmental experience, they're committed to like 20 weeks. They come to a meeting, 3-hour meeting, 20 weeks of the year. But
better be an engaging meeting for 3 hours at a time, right?
It actually very much is.
You got to fan out. Yeah,
right. They get to hear from, elected officials, the media, role play. They're acting as though they're presenting to legislators and things of that nature.
Right.
But it is such powerful work. And, as a part of that experience, the parents are also expected to complete a project that they get to self-select. So it could be addressing implicit bias or trying to advocate for a crosswalk in front of their school. We've also seen the graduates of that program and even participants as they go through the experience really step up and become voices for the issue of the day. And I'll just call out one, for example. We have a referendum that thankfully will be on the ballot this November for for a tax for our school facilities. And so we're really excited because the alumni of that program and all of our teacher advocacy initiatives and earlier community advocates connected through JPEF will now have an opportunity to really build that grassroots support that's necessary to get that passed. Unfortunately, we have the oldest facilities in Florida right now.
Is that right? In Jacksonville? Wow. So let's keep on this because this is really interesting for me. Trying to think that maybe the best question to ask. So once families go through, and maybe this is a nerd question since we're in the space, how are you evaluating success or like funneling up to your board or funders around it's great. We have these 20 families every year. We kill it. We crush it. They're great. Now they move on. I know you probably get tough questions. You're like, what happens after that? And I think from somebody who also gets those tough questions, would love to steal your answers if you don't mind. And maybe our listening audience too. So how do you guys measure success in that way?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, with this kind of work, we find it very important to survey participants to understand their level of civic engagement at the front end of the process and also on the back end of the process. So
I'm hearing.
Right. So whether they have spoken in public forums before, the extent to which they feel comfortable doing so after they've been developed in that area, and then whether they actually do it. And so, not even just kind of post-examination, but the year or years after that, really trying to measure how active these people become. In some of our other communities, I'll say this program is nationally known as Parent Leadership Training Institute. So we're very proud. This is what JPEF does. We bring national best practices to our community. And so we're happy to be the local site of that national program. But they have seen these parents go on to run for school board or to occupy other significant seats of influence in their communities. And so that's obviously another indicator of success.
That's cool. Wondering too, if it, maybe a tough question, but I don't think too tough. I think from our lens, we've seen maybe two main, but two focused kind of initiatives on families where sometimes it's school focused around engagement, empowerment, making sure school is quote unquote turned around, a better, safer place, is doing a better job at communicating with me as a parent. And we've seen other people approach it from a civic lens, a policy lens, which maybe sounds like more is JPEF. From our lens, those and many more are needed. But wondering how you see that spectrum or dynamic with the civic compared to focused on the school level at the same time.
I think both and are important. What I will say as far as our work in the former case, so the sort of school-based, I mentioned earlier that we are supporting school leaders. What I didn't mention is that we're supporting them across 4 key areas. The one of which is helping them meaningfully engage families and communities. And so that work is very much a part of what we're doing too. The other three areas, in case you're interested, building the requisite school climate and culture for success, helping those principals also develop good practices to attract and retain high quality educators. And then last but not least, we want to invest in them and their own leadership potential. We want them to understand sort of the differences between those management tasks and what it means to really set that leadership vision for their school and to really use data to drive improvements.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's super intentional and smart, knowing that I'd imagine too, some of the families that then graduate through the civics kind of initiative could come back and support the schools, focusing on those families, or attend those schools already where the principals are going. So talk about systemic change, serving both the principal and the families are really great.
That's exactly right. One of the things that we're really excited to do this year, as we broaden the number of principals we're supporting through the School Leadership Initiative, is we actually are also going to have incentives or grant dollars available to parents if they want to do work in those schools in particular. So it allows us to really sort of align our work intentionally and to get even more impact in those schools that we're hoping to prove some best practices in, so that those practices then can be brought to scale.
I'm with it. I think we've looked at it with some of the stuff we've done across the country, and there's kind of mixed results around supporting or paying families if they're like a contractor of JPEF or the school, what that looks like, and very real, not stipulations, but I think just things to consider, where if 10 families apply and one gets it, how do I kind of rectify the other 9 families are still supportive and should still be engaged and not feel a certain type of way if they got turned away for a quote unquote job. But also just the exchange of value for dollars, as any position or job would, I think signifies a lot of respect to families.
Yeah, I should clarify that basically what we're going to do is we're going to provide the grant to the school. So if we have multiple parents who want to invest in an area in a school, then the good news is that hopefully they'll be able to work together on that. And, we can kind of consider what the appropriate size of that grant should be for that work. But, that way we don't want to get into the, paying parents to, do these things. We really are investing in the work and in the school.
That makes sense. Yep. For the record, I'm still thinking about how at some point, some people pay families for some of the things they're asking them to do, whether it's around task force locally in Jacksonville and other places. I think sometimes they think it's enough to donate their time, which is, but we think when we just seen some innovative models around paying families for what they're worth.
Absolutely. Same story is true. We know at just all levels of leadership, we have this debate all the time around, school boards and, how do we really make sure that we have all voices at the table?
That's right. Sounds like you guys are, I'm just wondering how we get JPEF to open a Charlotte, a CPEF in Charlotte.
They have you. You guys don't need us.
Might be recruiting you. Yeah. Good try. Maybe we'll get Crystal to run that too. This is really cool. So I'm just kind of thinking about the next kind of place to go. But, we've kind of talked about COVID. We talked about some other things, but also the great work you guys are doing. 1 year, 2 year, 20 years from now, what will the future look like if you in your world? Is it a longer school day, a shorter school day with 2 different sessions? Are we teaching different curriculum? Given all the vast experiences you've had as a person growing up, and then now, what does an ideal public education system look like for you?
It's a good question. I think that an ideal education system to me looks like one that is able to meet the needs of every individual student. And so I know that obviously we've had big movements in this country around, personalized learning. I think more of that conversation has happened on the West Coast than I think has made its way fully to the East Coast where I serve. But I am eager and excited for us to really explore how we can do that well. I think obviously the coronavirus pandemic is challenging us in new ways to really think about, if we had to do more of this virtual reality situation, like
Yep.
what would it look like to make sure that every child is indeed being educated. I think that from my perspective, it will be really valuable. We know that students, obviously, from my perspective, virtual learning cannot replace school-based instruction. Very many students,
Or robots, maybe.
no robots.
Maybe you don't have to
Students
agree with me.
need human.
Yeah.
Say that again. You were breaking up.
Oh, sorry. I said you don't have to agree with
What'd
me
you say?
you don't have to agree with me about the robots part if you think robots can replace teachers. Um,
Oh, I do not think that. One of the things that I have learned through my work is that caring adults 100% matter. In addition to supporting young people to meet their academic goals and to achieve those types of outcomes, we have to meet the social and emotional needs of students as well. Unfortunately, I have yet to hear about a robot that can do that well. And so we need to kind of pay attention to the whole child. And, my hope is that if in the future, kind of hybrid types of options become more available, that we're able to differentiate based on the needs of students, and that we can make sure that we attend to the whole needs of all students.
That's great. And I think like we in our work like to get into the details too, but like the how. And so no, it's a super multifaceted conversation. I'm going to ask you to answer this in an unrealistic way, but just humor us if you will. So like then what would it take to get us there? If you could choose one thing, would it be foundation stepping up and giving a blank check? Would it be getting rid of school boards or adding more school boards? Know that you're have some stakeholders here. But just curious as like what it takes to actually move the needle in public education. What would you say?
My simplistic answer is going to be the varied types of resources. So I think we obviously need the monetary means to, innovate in schools the way that we need to. Unfortunately, in states like ours,
Yep.
funding for education often is short shrift, especially in the crisis moments. And so I'm very hopeful that we won't see significant cuts for education during this moment. But beyond that, it's not just about monetary resources, it's also about like human resources. And so how do we really help ensure that the people who are closest to the students have the insights that they need to deliver instruction to students, and not even just the insights, but also the influence, right? So if school leaders are the best for their school community, which hopefully you're getting good people and putting them in those positions, once they're there, how do we really support them to meet the needs of their students since they know them the best?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Thinking back what you said earlier too, just around Jacksonville and facilities, like the CDC recommendations around COVID, right, were around possibly having students' desks be 6 feet apart, only one student per bus seat, which a school district like Jacksonville probably don't have enough buses to run multiple shifts. Schools don't have the physical space or facilities to literally space kids out unless we're putting them in the cafeteria, the gym, or the hallway. And I think oftentimes what we see in maybe education, but also just larger bureaucratic systems is like the recommendations and policies don't meet the actual day-to-day of life in those schools.
Right.
And especially now layering a global pandemic on top of that, like squaring that puts people like you, but also school leaders and school districts in a really tough position to be successful.
Absolutely. I mean, I often say I haven't seen anything like this in my lifetime, but there are people far older than me who have not seen this in their lifetime. So, I believe this is absolutely a game changer. And I think that the language has shifted. I think, thankfully, for most people, we're not waiting to get back to normal. I think we realize that we're trying to determine what a new normal looks like. And, even though we haven't arrived at all the answers yet, I think we have raised a lot of very important questions. And unfortunately, to your point, what's happening in some, at the national level, the policy conversation does not necessarily always translate to reality on the ground. And so I think that we're really at the very beginning of learning and determining, how we can best meet the needs of students, and to make sure that when they do go back in the fall, because we don't know if the pandemic is going to come back.
Right.
I mean, first of all, it hasn't left yet,
Right.
but
Needs
you
to,
know,
right?
we don't know if we're going to see a significant uptick in cases or deaths that's going to cause us to have people go back and just engage completely virtually again.
Mhm.
And so right now what I have is a lot of questions and curiosities, and I'm eager to partner with people who are grappling with these things from a macro level at districts, at the state level, but also with those who are really confronting the challenge at the micro level, so at the school level.
Yes, to all those things. I'm thinking a number of things and trying to be logical here. I think one, thinking back to, again, to like, it just connects with the great work you guys are doing with families, because who has more of the answers, the actual answers of how to support families right now during the midst of a global pandemic than families. So you guys being able to tap into that current and alumni network, plus in addition to principals, I think is so incredible. So kudos to you guys for that. And the other thing I'm thinking about was we previously had Sil Gonzo, an executive director from a really prominent after-school program here in Charlotte, focused on immigrant and refugee children. She's from Venezuela. I'm hoping remembering that right. But she was talking about how they normally in schools in Venezuela go in shifts anyways. And so we'll go from 7 to 11 and then take a break, and then school empties, gets cleaned, and now it's 1 to 5 for the next. And it seems like, I don't think ever really happened in America, but given the global pandemic, and maybe we could argue maybe the school day doesn't need to be 8-9 hours. Interesting if that's a real solution moving forward in our country.
Yeah, and I think you raised a very good point about learning from other people who have tried things in different ways, particularly if they've experienced some very measurable and demonstrative success. Obviously, and sadly, this has been a global situation, and so I'm personally curious to see what our folks in Europe and other parts of the world are going to do as they get ready to go back to school as well.
Yeah. Okay, gonna get you out of here on a few hopefully fun and rapid fire questions. If we asked you what is the most innovative thing you're seeing in public education, you could be biased and talk about some of your work. You can talk about international models or anything else across the country, but would love, as like a leader in your position, what you've seen, what really excites you.
Well, this is, I could toot JPEF's horn all day. I'm very proud of the work that we do.
Sure.
One thing that I'm very passionate about that I want to see more of is actually, really empowering young people, students to, help drive the change that we desire in their own communities. And so, I've spent some time myself thinking about, how do we really tap into those just very localized insights and passions that young people have to help them arrive at the solutions that we need for the future. I think we've seen over the last few years, students really step up in very powerful ways in the policy space too. So, I'd love to see, kind of design thinking type sessions and creative formats to allow young people to help us craft the vision for the future.
Is that a new program I'm hearing maybe coming from JPEF soon?
We will have to see. It's definitely something that's in Rachael Tutwiler Fortune's head.
Good. Like it. And as always, the most important question of any meeting, what does square pizza remind you of?
That is a good question. The very honest answer to that question is Pizza Hut in my childhood.
Pizza Hut was square in Jacksonville?
They had pizza in all shapes and sizes. And how you can get, they have, they call it the box.
Yep.
So, I think that's probably the answer I would have to that question.
Like it. So then like the follow-up is like, did they serve it in schools? Because what we're learning as we ask this question is the answer is changing regionally, even in public schools.
So they did sell pizza in schools. I don't know about Pizza Hut, but that was kind of my go-to pizza place as a kid.
Was it like at the school, was it like the rectangular pizza that fit inside the tray?
Nah, it was just a slice in school.
Really? So interesting how it changes. We need to start like going up the food chain, talking about like cafeteria contractors in different states and like their philosophy on triangle or square pizza, I think.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
Interesting nonetheless, hopefully. Rachael, where can people find you, holler at you, Twitter you? Where do you want people to find you at?
Yeah, feel free to follow me on Twitter. I'm
Yep.
at Rachael Tutwiler. That's Rachael
Cool.
Tutwiler. Visit us at JPEF, www.jaxpef.org.
Cool. Yeah, we'll put all that in the show notes. Any final words or thoughts you want to leave the people with?
Just thanks for the opportunity. If folks are in the Jacksonville area and really looking for an organization that is focused on the data, focused on really leveraging research to try to move the needle in public education, please look us up. We do a lot of work to really convene stakeholders and to support them to that very end. And so, just encourage and invite anyone to engage with us at any time.
Cool. Well, I'm biased since you're joining our podcast, but thank you for your work. Thank you for who you are as a human. And we appreciate you.